Hello there, welcome back to Talking Europe. Now, it is just about a year since the EU's biggest member state, Germany, voted in a federal election from which we are still feeling the consequences. Most recently, a weakened Angela Merkel has been taking political knocks, particularly as anger boils over violent incidents involving migrants in Germany's east. Well, meanwhile, outside of Germany, the rise of far-right Sweden Democrats in the latest election is focusing European minds on why so many people are voting for nationalists and populists around the EU. I'm joined today by someone who has been intimately involved in the highest level of German politics for years, a former diplomat and advisor to Chancellor Helmut Kohl. Joachim Bitterlich is today an advisor to the Austrian presidency of the EU and a professor at the ESCP Business School here in Paris. Joachim Bitterlich, thank you very much for being with us.
It's a pleasure, as always.
I would like to start off in your home country of Germany. People all around the world have seen those pictures from Chemnitz, which has been in the news for a couple of weeks now. In recent days, we also had a few thousand people in the town of Curtin, also in East Germany, going to a march organised by the far right. Now, both of these incidents sparked by violence allegedly carried out by migrants. Investigations still going on, of course. But your reaction to this upsurge in tensions in the East?
On the one hand, it's clear we cannot accept any extremism or radicalization of a situation. On the other hand, we have to understand the anxieties of people, especially in Eastern Germany. Eastern Germany, 1990 is not so far away as we think.
Talking about German reunification.
Exactly. People till that date have been, let's say, in a closed door. They have not been living through, let's say, through the existence of foreigners, of refugees. They had small quotas or contingents of foreigners, Vietnamese, Angolians, Algerians, for training purposes in the East. But even at that time, we know it today, we had minor incidents, or perhaps even major incidents, with the population. This population has still, let's say, a certain reflex of anxiety towards foreigners, towards refugees, towards anyone who is not from Germany or from Europe in a wider sense.
We're talking there about cultural reasons. These are also some of the poorest regions of Germany, which we know is overall a wealthy country. But there are a lot of people suffering economically in these eastern regions. Do you believe that has been overlooked in the context of the migration situation?
I think when I look at the overall development of the last 20 years, we have been underestimating certain complexes. For example, when you look at the look of people today at the work of a Treuhand, who had been administrating the integration of the East German economy into the Western German system, today people look at this much more critical than we have been looking at that time. And I think we have to understand these people have to some extent a certain feeling of inferiority, of at least being treated in a much worse way than Western Germans have been treated before. And therefore, this feeling is to some extent maintained.
And just very much on the kind of the day-to-day security level of all of this, as I mentioned, there were violent incidents behind these marches and all of these tensions. Do you believe that German authorities do have a handle on internal security? People are very worried about this influx of people from all over the world who we don't necessarily know what their backgrounds are or their identities.
I'm sure the German police have underestimated the risk of these situations, especially in Eastern Germany. We should have done it, let's say it, in another way. For example, from 1990 on, we didn't ask in these years to send refugees to Eastern Germany because we were aware in this period of the development. But today, people thought it's overcome, now we can do it as we do it in Western Germany. I think police and interior authorities have underestimated the risk, the sense of sensitivity of people towards these events. They have not been really prepared to it. By the way, neither them nor the refugees. The refugees have not been prepared at all, let's say, to what they have to cope with while arriving in Germany, in a Western European state.
I think the obvious follow-up question then is what's to be done about it? Because it seems that nobody wants this current situation to continue. No one believes that it can continue on the same path.
The worst punishment of politics is if people have the feeling the situation is out of control. Policy has to get it under control again. And second, to do much more for not only with regard to migration policy in general, but at the same time prepare people who arrive in a Western state better to the situation as it is. For example, the treatment of women. It's totally different in their countries than in the Western world. They have to be prepared that they arrive into another society, another world. It's not only language training, it's civilization training from the beginning. I know this has limits too. Look at Sweden, for example, where they do it. But on the other hand, I think we have to do a real effort there. The other side is clearly migration policy. That we have to offer another way of migration policy as we have been doing till now.
Now, in Sweden, the recent election there saw the Sweden Democrats far-right party get their biggest vote share ever. Now, as we know, this party campaigned heavily on the issue of immigration. Sweden was, in fact, the country in the EU that took in the most asylum seekers per capita in 2015. A huge influx for Sweden.
And I think politics in Sweden have to understand they have gone to some extent too far. You have areas in Sweden where police can't work anymore in a normal way. They have done, let's say, real efforts to familiarize arriving refugees and others to the situation of a country. But there are limits for people. And if you overload the burden of people in a psychological way, well, you have to cope with it.
Well, some of our reporters have been taking a look at how integration, how immigration is working out within Sweden, how much it's costing the country, what kind of results we're seeing. Take a look at this report.
Diversity reigns at this music and food truck festival in the heart of Stockholm. Among the attendees and chefs, some of the 440,000 migrants that have arrived in the country since 2015. For many Swedes, the recent arrivals are a breath of fresh air.
15 country represented here, yeah?
It would be so boring to be at this food festival if it was like only Swedish food, right?
19% of the Swedish population was born abroad. But the country's model of integration has become a growing source of division. At this employment agency, all relevant instructions and information are translated into 6 languages. This Syrian couple who arrived in Sweden 3 weeks ago is accompanied by an interpreter for their first appointment.
Swedish people are so well organized. It's a luxury to be here. Of course, we had heard about it, but now we are seeing it firsthand.
According to this advisor, there's no shortage of employment options. More than 93,000 positions are available. Sweden's workforce is shrinking, so to encourage new arrivals, the government covers up to 78% of their salaries.
46% of immigrants find a job in less than 3 months, and that number is increasing from year to year.
Immigrants have contributed to the country's economic growth, which hit 2.4% last year. For those who are too young or did not find work right away, the government offers 2 years of intensive Swedish lessons, free of charge. Attendance is mandatory, opening up access to a variety of public assistance programs, free healthcare, free education, and even housing allowances. In total, Sweden spends nearly 4 billion euros annually to assist and integrate immigrants. It's an unquestionably generous system, which many now criticize. A growing reality the far right has seized, placing immigration at the heart of its campaign.
So we've got a little illustration of the situation in Sweden. We heard there that almost 4 billion euros are spent annually on integration efforts. But at the same time, some of the people in that report seem to be quite pleased about how it's panning out. There is this ongoing question, isn't there, about migration? Many people saying this is a drain, these are public resources, public money that we should be spending on people who are from here, spent many years here. Other people saying, no, this can be a boon and an opportunity for the country.
Can be both. But When you look at the Sweden Democrats, they are not comparable to the AfD in Germany. The AfD is becoming more and more a wolf in sheep's clothes in Germany.
In what sense?
It's becoming more and more extremist, more and more open towards real extremist forces. When you look at the development of the AfD in Germany, it has been a mixture of what I call a contestation party, contestation of all what they up at the top have been deciding. Sort of, let's say, we are not being understood by politics anymore. But at the same time, it's becoming more and more a party taking up really extremist votes and extremist people.
And do you believe that the presence of the AfD in the German parliament is pushing German politics in new directions? Is it taking the centre-right parties further to the right?
I think the German politics have to reflect on this. We have had in the past the situation where German politicians like Willy Brandt, Helmut Kohl had always said, we don't want to tolerate any party on our left, for the Social Democrats and for the Christian Democrats on our right. This has been broken through 1990, through German reunification, through the existence of left or former Communist Party, which has more or less really integrated in the German system and left open the right side. And the Christian Democrats at the same time were moving much more to the center, no more covering, let's say, a more nationalist wing, if you want, that we have always had in the past, in the Liberal Party and in the Christian Democratic Party. And therefore, this is an open side, an open wing in Germany, where the AfD entered into. Result, parties are now reflecting what to do with these people. A certain part of this party you may reintegrate in the existing forces. We have been observing, for example, often that in certain areas of bigger cities where factories are, that we had swings from the extreme left to the extreme right. Indeed. And vice versa. We have seen this.
That's happened in France as well.
In the 80s, 70s, France, Eastern France or Northern France, we have seen this. I think these people can be taken back by existing parties. But we have still, let's say, an extreme right-wing or left-wing side, which is difficultly to be taken back.
Right, well, I said we were going to talk about migration, so let's come back to that topic. As I mentioned, you're advising the Austrian presidency of the EU on that very topic currently. Now, Austria has been viewed quite critically by some for its stance over migration, particularly during the 2015 influx there. Do you believe it's time for an overhaul of European migration policies, and if so, what kind?
I think the overhaul is going on, has been going on since 2015.
But not in a very coherent way.
Slowly, too much, too slow, perhaps, and not in the sense of a comprehensive concept of migration.
It's been very piecemeal. Angela Merkel at the last EU Council talking about bilateral deals being struck.
Yes, this is part of the overall deal. That we have to deal with all what I call the critical neighbors in Northern Africa, even towards Central Africa, in the southeast and east, Turkey, from Turkey over to Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and then the Central African states. We have to deal with them. Who can do this? I think some are nearer than others, and therefore I think there has to be a real relationship between Brussels and the member states to deal with this phenomenon together. This means, at the same time, not only to look at the migration problem in these countries, this means to have a relook at all our development policy. This means that we have to cooperate with these countries in order to avoid, let's say, a sort of illegal migration we cannot accept, where we have to send back people. But on the other hand, we have to be clear, and I think the Austrians are clear about this, if there are people pursued in their countries, there are real asylum seekers, the door remains open. But we have to avoid, let's say, the whole dangerous travel through the Mediterranean, now going through Spain, In the last year, it was going through southern Italy. Now it's through Spain, especially. We have to avoid these extremely difficult, and we have to stop trafficking with these people.
Well, unfortunately, we've only got time for one more question, I think. The migration situation, it did seem to highlight splits between essentially the West and the Central and Eastern parts of Europe. Member states such as Hungary also being heavily criticised for their reaction to that, and also their way of running their countries generally. How bad do you think these splits are?
We should not demonize these countries. There is a certain schisma, if you want, between East and West today. These countries, please don't forget, we have always said to them, you're welcome once you are free. We were free and then we were hesitating for a certain time. When we were negotiating the accession, we did it technocratically, let's say, in a rather good way. But we have totally forgotten that these countries had to develop or to re-establish first their national identity before developing any European one. And we have not been assisting enough these countries in developing a national identity compatible with our view we have been developing since World War II, since the end of World War II, for the last 60 years. We should have done much more in this way.
Well, plenty to look ahead in the future of Europe. Thank you very much for your time, Joachim Bitterlich, for speaking to us here on Talking Europe. Thanks you as well for watching. We'll see you soon for more European news on France 24.